Just a little bit of history repeating.
In the 15th century, artists in Florence, Italy started to show a renewed interest in Greek and Roman not only art, but also philosophy. In this video, we're going to start to see how humanists tried to move beyond what the Catholic Church told them what they could and couldn't do, and started to develop a new kind of thought, humanism. So you have to remember that in the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church was in control of people's lives completely. God was the center of the universe. But in the Renaissance, humanists rediscovered Greek and Roman philosophy, and these philosophers started talking about things very different than the Catholic Church, such as the meaning of life or the proper role of a human being in society. Now you have to remember that humanists were still people who believed in God, but they shifted from thinking of God as the center of the universe to realizing that human beings should be a much more central concern, and that humans were capable of reason and progress and development, and they believed that humans should have freedom of thought. Now, the humanists also changed what it meant to learn. So before, learning was really people focusing on memorizing quotes from the Bible or commentaries from the Bible by heart. But humanists started to develop an education that was based on the growth of the individual. Now, at a time when Europe was being torn apart by religious wars, you're going to see that the humanists that we're going to look at were preaching peace and tolerance instead of violence. Desiderius Erasmus was known as the Prince of the Humanists because he had tremendous influence over the other humanists at the time. He had this influence by writing a whole bunch of letters with all the different humanists, and he had these printed and contained in a collection of about 1,200 letters, which is pretty insane when you think about it. Now, he spoke and wrote in Latin because most European thinkers, even though they may have had a different language, all were educated in Latin. And Erasmus devoted his entire life to studying ancient writings, and he was positive that through knowledge and reason, humans would be able to progress. And throughout his life, he preached peace and tolerance. Michel de Montaigne was a French humanist, obviously with a name like that, and he really pushed humans to reject being certain of anything and tried to preach doubt, criticism, and freedom of thought. Now, like Erasmus, he hated war and really wanted people to be peaceful and tolerant. And he was able to preach this tolerance because he made many trips throughout Europe, and he saw the different laws and customs of other people, and this led him to develop a cultural tolerance. So here we have Thomas More. Now, not only was he super bro-y with Erasmus, he was also an incredibly important English humanist. His major work, Utopia, imagines an egalitarian society where everything is peaceful and people are tolerant. And the word utopia is now in the English language meaning an idealistic or perfect world. So this map really shows you how humanism spread. Now, the humanists took many trips throughout Europe, so they met one another, and in these discussions, their ideas spread. They also wrote letters, and European towns developed universities, and this guy, Johannes Gutenberg, started the printing revolution. Now, printing was originally invented in China, but it was Johannes Gutenberg who came up with the idea of making movable metal type and then invented the printing press in 1455. The very first book he printed was a Bible. More than 2/3 of the books in the world that were being made on printing presses were in Latin, and nearly half were religious, so Bibles, prayer books, books of Psalms, but the rest were books by the ancient Greek and Latin philosophers and by the humanists. Because monks were no longer writing books letter by letter and line, the printing press allowed for a mass production of literature and allowed books and learning to spread and circulate throughout Europe. Now, during the Middle Ages, the Church controlled all of science, and anything that disagreed with what the Church believed, like let's say the Earth being the center of the universe, was against the law. You couldn't argue with the church. In fact, just for going against the Bible, you could be killed. Luckily for the humanists, there were scientists like the Polish scholar Nicholas Copernicus, who formulated a new theory of astronomy that said that the Earth orbited around the Sun and was not the center of the universe. Now, he based his theory, and a lot of other science-related humanists based their theories on observation, experimentation, and reason. The printing press made it possible for mathematicians like Copernicus and scientists to publish their work. Medicine was another field that was changing during the Renaissance. Flemish physician Andreas Vesalius is considered today to be the father of modern anatomy, and he published 16th century plates of his dissections, and these were really important to medicine during the Renaissance. And even Leonardo da Vinci, the Renaissance's greatest Renaissance man, the guy who was interested in math, geometry, architecture, and art, also took part in biology, and he proposed a method of observation and analysis where you would look at things carefully, and he performed numerous dissections to better understand and draw the human body. So we saw in this video how the humanists criticized the church in terms of science and thought. Now, in doing this, they actually contributed to a reform movement in Europe at the beginning of the 16th century, and this movement led to the formation of the Protestant Church. So we're going to look at the Reformation in our next video and how the church responded to it.